Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita. I'm one of the designers of Cosmic Odyssey and Cosmic Dominion. And I've been doing a number of videos on Dune where I have brainstormed and speculated about what a Dune 2nd edition might look like. And then there's no plans for one. But a number of people have asked me what are my thoughts on Cosmic Encounter 2nd edition. So this video I'm going to just do some stream of consciousness speculating and talking about what a 2nd edition of Cosmic Encounter might be like. First of all, I think it is a great idea. And it's certainly not an unknown or unique novel thing for Fantasy Flight. They've done 2nd, 3rd, 4th edition of Twilight Imperium. They've done several editions of Arkham Horror. Even X-Wing had a 2nd edition not long after the 1st edition had been around. So I think it's a fantastic idea, and we've learned a lot in 15 years of having Cosmic Encounter with Fantasy Flight. So I think the first thing is revisiting the rule book and coming up with a Cosmic Encounter rules and style guide Bible to help with consistency. I think that's one of the big things, is there's a lot of just weird little inconsistencies, things about captured ships and their status, and rewards, defender rewards, and countless other elements where there's one template used at one point and then different phrasing or elements on subsequent ones. And part of that is just there were different designers involved and different quality control teams, and they didn't have a style guide or anything like that. It was actually something that Frank Brooks was thinking about during the development of Cosmic Odyssey. He's like, it's high time we had one, and it's a little bit late in the day for that to be started, but it was still a great idea. And so that's a great jumping off point, is just saying, all right, let's sit down and think about a lot of these things where we have contradictory rules, or there's ambiguities, and then you're starting by defining those early on in the rule book and the expansion rule books. And again, if you're doing a 2nd edition, then you know a lot of what is going to be coming because you're just republishing it, so you can plan ahead a lot more effectively. You know about variants that are eventually going to be part of 2nd edition, and you can plan for those a little bit more effectively. Other things that I think a 2nd edition would do is maybe clarify better the use part of aliens and when they can be zapped and when they can't be zapped. And there's probably a few different ways that you can visually make that clear to all players. And that's something that Bill Martinson and I had a discussion about at Escape Velocity a few years ago, and he had some interesting ideas about that. So getting people like that involved too, I think, would be very helpful in kicking off what different ways you can do to improve and clarify gameplay. I think that 2nd edition, you maybe don't want to have technology as the variant. You want to have the reward deck. It's the one thing that everybody seems to love the most in terms of variants, and I think having it in the base game, and it's a variant, so you don't necessarily want to use it right away when you're learning it, and you can really curate a good first reward deck knowing that you're going to be adding to it later on in a couple of expansions. So maybe you make 2nd edition Cosmic Incursion has technology. And I would think about going straight to the Cosmic Odyssey rules on technology. It's tradable, and you don't necessarily have to have 3 types of technology right away in that first expansion, although maybe you do. But I think as we have looked back over the years at technology, we've found that a lot of them are a little too expensive. And so those costs should be reevaluated. And I think the new types of technologies, like the military technology, really helps to balance out high-cost techs that normally take way too long to develop. So there's a potential of developing those early at its own cost. And the tech refresh idea, which is where you have a tech and you play it, and once it has been fully researched, you get to draw another one. And a lot of the Cosmic Odyssey techs have that as an effect. So I think technology has a slightly more evolved approach right from the get-go. Same thing with hazards, and I think, you know, if you're doing a second edition on each of the expansions, you can play around with the mix of the aliens. So if let's say that technology is the variant in Cosmic Incursion, or you know, maybe you give it a whole new name, but whatever, the first expansion, you say, you know what, engineer is a good alien to have in that expansion. And so you get to shuffle around the aliens, what's going to be, even in the base game. I think I would revisit some of those. And I would probably go with the alternate timeline version, a lot of those aliens, so that they're a little more balanced and competitive from the base game. You don't have to worry about doing an alternate version. So when you get to the new Cosmic Storm, you're going with the new Brute and the new Grumpus, and maybe you do a redesign on how those space stations are so they don't have such a huge cardboard footprint, and that way you can have more of them in the expansion. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for really interesting improvements, and you got to include some new stuff. So there's always going to be new aliens that could be added into the mix, and you slip in one or two brand new aliens into the base game, and maybe you move a couple of the other ones out into an expansion. They don't necessarily get dropped altogether. I can't think of anything in the base game that I would drop. But like Demon as a 51st alien, if you're going to have 51 aliens, I would maybe not have Demon be the 51st one. And I understand why it was a way to get it back in. Probably you would just go back to 50 aliens. And I would also get back to those opaque ships. I like the opaque better than the translucent. I think it's easier to see the little fun little details on the ships with the opaque ones. And maybe play around with some new colors. I like the idea of a marble one. Might help with colorblind issues. I play games with a lot of people who have varying color blindness, and not to make light of it, but it's always interesting where, you know, I'll say, hand me one of those green ships, and this literally happened. My two friends each reached for a non-green ship, and I was like, I'll get it. Don't worry about it. And so, because they just had a hard time with the colors. I think the individual planets is a keeper, but I think doing something different on the backside. So you had two different sides on those planets, but they weren't super different. One, it was a little bit slightly more colorful, and then the other one a little more monochromatic, but it was very subtle. And a lot of times when they're on the table and they have half one, half the other, it's hard to even tell. So it wasn't really distinct enough that you could do interesting variants with them. But I think you open up the possibility. And I like how Mayfair's base game edition of Cosmic Encounter, they had the reverse hex systems there built in. So it was an extra variant, really, that you got in the base game box. And I don't know necessarily you're going to do special systems as a base game variant, but I think doing something where the art is different on those planets opens you up for some possibilities. If you do special systems down the line, now you've got the ability to take advantage of existing components without having to add in a lot of new ones. You can now say, all right, here's an effect that you can now use it. Very much like how in our first edition, our original edition, they had reference to the hazard effect, but it didn't really do anything until the second expansion. And so that, I think, is a fun and interesting thing that you can do. You can still plant those seeds. And like I said, we have the experience of 7 expansions worth of content, so planning ahead for stuff, I think, will be even more fun. So I like those ideas too. I think back to the color blindness, I think you can have a more distinct alert level system. So it's not just based on colors, but maybe those lamps have different shapes to them, where maybe it's a bigger bulge on the top for the green, and then it's bigger in the middle for the yellow and the bottom for the red, so that the lamps themselves are visually different as well. I guess color still is visually, but you know what I mean, shape as well as color. And again, you're using the experience of how much text do you need to fit on an alien sheet, and should you come up with a template right away that takes advantage of that. So you are using just one template. It's certainly worth looking at. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think would make for a good approach to a second edition. There's not a lot that needs to be changed, but there's a lot of little things that can improve gameplay and can improve consistency across all of the expansions and the base game. And the rule book can do a better job of understanding, all right, yeah, if you win the encounter, at what point do the ships land and the ships there go to the warp? Is there an order of operations there? Is it just you're still using the timing rules? But then if you've got other ships on the planet, let's say you've got an effect where everybody on the planet is being removed, do they go in different orders? And so that's, it's questions that come up. And I think you go through the FAQ and you go through questions that have arisen post FAQ, and you say, all right, what can we do to make the rule book address these things a little bit earlier? Maybe it's a matter of you got the rules, and then you've got these nice little columns. I've seen this in a few different rule books where you've got call outs to edge cases and clarifications to things. So it's all right there, but you don't have to worry so much about the edge case stuff until those situations arise. I recently played the second edition of Doom, the board game from Fantasy Flight, and they had one rule book was how to learn how to play, and it had a scenario, and then they just had a rules reference where it was all the rules alphabetically listed so that you could quickly look stuff up, and I really like that idea too. I think something like that is more valuable even than a quick start guide. I think it really gives you the opportunity to quickly find a section, because that's the thing that I hate about when I'm playing a game that I haven't played 1,000 times all the time, trying to quickly look up something when we're like, oh, what happens in this weird situation? And that rules reference was very handy when we were playing Doom the first time. There it is, the second edition. Had a good time, really enjoyed it, and we were all learning how to play it, and I had a pretty good handle on how to play, but there were a couple of situations that came up, and that rules reference was very handy. So, again, a base game and 7 expansions worth of experience. You could put things into that rules reference that aren't even in the base game yet. So you're like, all right, we know how to do that. But even then, the stuff from the variants, they don't really have a lot. There's not a huge FAQ on technology. It's fairly straightforward. There's a couple of things, but I think you can cover that in whatever expansion rule book that you come out with. And you can use the space to have a few extra, rules references on there. So let me know your thoughts. If you knew that Cosmic Encounter was going to be doing a second edition, what would you want to see happen? What are some things? Are there fundamental rules changes to gameplay that you would want to have implemented or to be at least considered? Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any rules changes that I think are necessary or desirable, frankly. But differences will occur. You may have a different opinion on that, and I certainly would want to know. If I were one of the developers, I would want to know, what is it an issue? If a lot of people are like, oh, we think, there should only be one encounter. And maybe it's a variant, the single encounter per turn. I'm still a big fan of 2 encounters. I think it's important, but you know, you could have a thing where maybe it's first time around you only get 1. You know, you win an encounter and you earn a 2 encounters per turn token. I don't know. Just spitballing here. Again, I don't think it's necessary, but you know, we've had 40 years of it. I don't think that is broken at all, but it's something that I know I've heard a couple of people occasionally suggest. It is a variant that I have on one of my custom age cards. So I think it's something that's worth doing sometimes, but I don't think it should be the base rule. But like I said, let me know your thoughts. What are your ideas? What are your demands for a 2nd edition? And do you demand a 2nd edition? Do you actually want a 2nd edition of Cosmic Encounter? Now we've got all this content. Should it be revisited? Should it be compatible? If you're like, well, I got 2nd edition, because X-Wing, technically you can use your 1st edition stuff with it, thank God. Although I still only play 1st edition, so I'm a little bit of an outlier there, but some kind of conversion kit. I would want to make it as compatible as possible. But again, I like the idea of some fresh ideas, new approaches, and improvements. That's really, at the end of the day, what it's about, is making that game even better. So if there are ways to do it, let's hear it. And that's it for this one, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.